He stood up for the oppressed. He incurred the wrath of the powerful. He argued with his superiors, struggled with the bureaucracy, and administered a constituency that didn't always cooperate. And he also created an intricate system of government. Who was this man, and why did he have to come here instead of staying where he thought he could do some real good? Marie-Charles Pandosy, Father Pandosy, on today's Okanagan Pioneers and Places. Welcome to Okanagan Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts with you, and our storyteller today, Dr. Dwayne Thompson of Okanagan University College. He's a professor of history there. He's been fascinated by this man, Father Pandosy. There's a mission in Kelowna that's called the Father Pandosy Mission. We call that area the mission, but what do we really know about this man? Where did Father Pandosy come from?
Well, he came from southern France, from Provence, and as a very young man, 24 years of age, he decided to adventure to the New World and jumped a ship in France and sailed to New York, and from there came across the continent with four other missionaries.
So he had been getting some religious training, but he wasn't even an ordained priest when he came across to North America.
That's right. He had, I think, 3 levels to go by the time he got here. So. And then there was a fairly rushed job after he got here to ordain him
sort of
as
a field commission.
I think so.
Now, what kind of things had he studied? What kind of talents did he bring with him?
He was certainly a Latin scholar, studied literature, was a good musician, although I'm not sure how much training he had, but certainly was a very observant and a very literate fellow. Certainly studies in theology as well.
So maybe he knew how to learn, but he didn't have very many skills for this task. I mean, he wasn't even a rural guy when he was in France.
No, he wasn't. He was an urban, middle-class urban background, of that nature. And he spent 10 years before he came to the Okanagan, though, in a frontier environment. And I think he learned a lot of the skills in Washington Territory.
He sure did, because when he arrives there, what's the date and what's happening in Washington Territory when he arrives?
Well, the Bishop of Walla Walla had asked de Mesnard, the Oblate founder, to send Oblate priests to the area as missionaries to the Indians. And when he came, he was involved in setting up missions. And I think he set up 3 in a period of about a year. But very shortly after he arrived, the Whitman Massacre occurred in Washington Territory, and what's called the Cayuse War began. And
the Cayuse is the name of the Indian tribe that is at war with what? The American cavalry, the American army?
Both the American army and what was called the Oregon Volunteers. And so the Cayuse War began, and that began a period of about a decade of war in Washington Territory. Ended up in about 1858 when the U.S. cavalry rounded up a good number of the Spokane Indians' horses and shot about 600 of them to effectively demobilize the Indians in the area.
Boy, that's the effective way to do it, isn't it? Now, what do we know about the Indians of this community? I mean, what are they doing? Who is he ministering to? Who is Pandosy and his other oblates ministering to?
Well, he first worked with the Yakima Indians near the current city of Yakima. And he later referred to them as his beloved Yakimas. And when the war began, they became a center of attention for the Oregon Volunteers. And so as the Oregon Volunteers approached his mission, the Indians, the Yakima Indians, and Father Pandosy with them fled in the face of that military force coming in. So he traveled with those Yakima for some months, lived with them under their protection for some months. Then eventually ended up with the Jesuits in Colville, took refuge there. Then, other part of his career, he worked with with the U.S. cavalry. In fact,
See, this is such a conflicting thing. He works with the Indian people on one hand and then ministers to the Catholic soldiers of the American cavalry on the other.
I don't think there was a conflict from his perspective. From his perspective, these were Catholic soldiers who needed a priest, and he was prepared to provide religious services to them. Certainly, his main focus of his life was a missionary to the Indian people. But of course, neither the Indians, when he was administering to the soldiers, the Indians looked askance at him.
This was a conflict of interest as far as they were concerned.
And certainly, when he was working with the Indians, the white population viewed him as an agitator, somebody who would be inciting Indians to war. There's an incident in Yakima where the Oregon Volunteers dig up a barrel of gunpowder in his garden, and of course this is evidence as far as they're concerned, and as far as the governor is concerned as well, that that he is in fact supplying ammunition to the Indians and in various ways inciting them.
That treasonous kind of thing. I mean, what was the effect of that? I mean, why did he have a gunpowder buried in his garden anyway?
Well, anyone on a frontier has legitimate uses for guns, for hunting and various things. But so I don't think for a minute that he was supplying ammunition to Indians so that they could attack the United States cavalry.
He was just maybe hiding the ammunition from the Oregon Volunteers who were roaming through. That's how the Army moved in those days. You just took from the land what you needed to survive.
That's right. So I don't know why he had it there, but he was obviously hiding it so that it wouldn't be confiscated, I suppose.
Yeah.
And
what was the effect of that being discovered?
Well, he was already traveling with Indian people, and obviously this was used as evidence that he was more than just traveling under their protection, that he was actually agitating and taking their side, and he was an Indian lover.
So the Oblates have to figure out something to do with this Father Pandosy fellow.
Well, he works with the Jesuits in Colville. He administers the Coeur d'Alene Indians in that area at some time. And so he's in this war zone for 10 years. And eventually, the Oblates give up on Washington Territory. They can't achieve their purposes when they're, call it damned if they do and damned if they don't in that situation. I call it a crossfire. He was caught in a crossfire.
He was indeed.
And it was both a literal crossfire in terms of the warfare that was going on, but it was this figurative crossfire as well, where neither of the two sides will accept his participation with the enemy.
Okay. What's his future? We're going to take a break here, but come back in just a moment because he discovers he's not far from Yakima in the Okanagan. We'll do that right after this break. Welcome back to Okanagan Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts with Dwayne Thompson talking about Father Pandosy, Father Marie Charles Pandosy.
He had about 3 or 4 other names too, but he signed it Marie Charles.
Marie Charles. He's 35 years old now. He's had 10 years of Indian wars in Washington State. He's gone from a sort of a wet behind the ears youth to a pretty savvy kind of character. How does he find his way to the Okanagan?
He was a frontline troop by the time he moved to the Okanagan. As I mentioned, the Oblates decided to withdraw from Washington Territory and to concentrate their efforts north of the 49th parallel. They thought it would be a more fruitful environment, but more politically stable. And so they assigned him to open up the first mission in the interior, which was in the Okanagan.
Okay. How did he greet this kind of news?
I think he was comfortable with it. Obviously, he missed his Yakima Indians, but he was moving into an area, the Okanagan, where they spoke a language very similar to that. So he was comfortable with the language, I think. But he was also comfortable in a whole variety of other ways. He'd lived in an environment that's a desert-like, semi-arid area. He'd engaged in agriculture through irrigation. He obviously had seen political conflict and military conflict, and he was well prepared, no question.
Okay. And we're dealing with about 1859, so the Fraser River Gold Rush has already begun. The prospectors are roaring north from California to seek the new gold. What does he discover in the Okanagan? Can you draw me a picture of what it was like in the delta of the Mission Creek?
He brought with him a settler, in fact, a man by the name of Cyprian Lawrence. And very quickly, at the same time that he arrived, or within a few weeks, other gold miners came looking for gold in Mission Creek. And so we saw a series of preemptions along Mission Creek. His preemption was right at a site of the significant kokanee fishery on Mission Creek. The creek was actually called L'Anse au Sable Creek at the time. It later became Mission Creek because of the mission being there.
Gotcha. And so it's a French community. I mean, Pandosy's French, Lawrence is French,
That's
Laquim
right.
is French.
Laquim, Pion, Boucherie, it's the French community in the interior of British Columbia.
And he decides to put his mission right there on Mission Creek, where he's going to encounter the Indians, certainly in the fall when they come in to do their kokanee fishing.
He is. The site has other attractions. As I mentioned, it's on the river where there is some gold at least. It's beautiful meadowland that's suitable for agriculture and for grazing purposes. And of course, the fishery is right there, and a large number of Indians that he's come to work with assemble there at least occasionally. Yeah. So.
What does he builds his mission starting right then? Where does he find the people to do that kind of hewing? This is all square cut timbers of broadaxe work?
Well, he was one of two missionaries who came in. Father Pierre Richard accompanied him. Pandosy was the head of the mission. Also accompanying him were two lay brothers, one of whom was a carpenter. And so they would have hired local carpentry. I know, for example, when they built their mill, they hired the carpentry done. He wouldn't have physically done the work himself.
He's dressed in a cassock. He's carrying the cross. He's ministering, but he seems to has to do all sorts of other work as well.
Yes, he does. It's mostly, though, administrative and organizing activity. He was not someone who wanted to be involved in personal labor. In fact, he wrote that he didn't want to work in the fields. He didn't want comparisons to be drawn between oblates and Jesuits who didn't have to work in the field.
Right on. And what was his relationship with the Okanagan Indians, seeing as that's why he moved here in the first place? What did he have the effect of drawing them to the Christian church?
He was only here for 2 years, and so I think when we're talking about that, we have to talk about the impact of the order in the area. He left after 2 years, and Father Durio took his place. Richard stayed in the area. And then there was a succession of different priests, Fathers Baudra, Father Gendre, Father Grandidier. Their letters have all survived, and very, very interesting source of the historical record for us.
What do we know about the kind of guy Pandosy was from the records, from the letters that he sent?
Well, it's very different from the image that we have of him. Father Pandosy is a folk hero in the Okanagan. We've got mission is named after him, roads are named, I think there's even a winery named after him. But through his letters, one gets to know him quite well, and he's a very different personality emerges. He is uncomfortable with authority, which is ironic because he's a man who's taken a vow of obedience to his church, and that discomfort with authority shows itself in many ways. He's very impatient and very exasperated with what he calls the church administration.
What does he want to do? Are they holding him back? Are they repressing him? What are they doing?
Well, they may not be providing him with the funds that he thinks is necessary, or they may be transferring him around too much, or they may be doing something else. He's in the field, and they're in New Westminster, and
they don't understand what
they
it's
don't
like.
understand the real problems that they're facing out there.
Well, what's his circuit like? I mean, what does he do when he is here?
Well, there would be 2 priests established at the mission at any one time, 3 if they were running a school. And they had a lot of responsibilities on site, but they did have to go to a fairly wide territory. Right up to north of Kamloops, the Nicola, Spalmsheen, right down to the border. they were involved in a fairly extensive one, including the Shuswap and Okanagans.
So he would have missions on those sites, or was he like a circuit judge and only a circuit priest?
Yes, probably once a year, a priest would take a tour. And it would take him a day to get to the head of the lake, and he'd spend 3 or 4 days there. Another day to get to Spalamsheen, he'd spend 2 or 3 days there. Then to Shuswap Lake, and then down to the Scotland Reserve probably, and then down to Kamloops, then up to the North Thompson, and over to the... He would spend up to a week at a village.
Now, is he walking? Is he horseback riding? What's he doing? How's he getting?
Well, they like to ride horseback, but they didn't always have that opportunity. But they usually did. They'd have a guide. They'd travel with a young Indian lad, probably, who was a guide to take them from place to place.
Okay.
And
Father Pandosy is only here for a couple of years, but he starts something that is going to last a long time. What kind of government do you create in a location that will further your requirements? When we come back, we'll talk about an interesting form of government that was established by the church in this location. Don't go away. Welcome back to Okanagan Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts with Dr. Dwayne Thompson talking about Father Pandosy. And we have a bust of Father Pandosy on the set. As a matter of fact, it was done by Jack Klassen. He was hoping it to be a Millennium Project, and nobody picked it up, but a great idea. He looks like quite the imposing character.
all records of him are that he was a big man with a deep voice, which he used to effect on various occasions. A very independent man, traveled on horseback with a saddle blanket and bacon on behind it. And
yeah, he said, "Give me a saddle blanket and bacon, I'll go anywhere, anytime."
That's right.
And over 6 feet tall.
Yes,
I mean,
he was
an imposing figure.
Yes, he was.
This helped him, obviously, in relationships. You say, look at this is the physical specimen. Now I'm going to show you the intellectual specimen behind it.
He did have a good relationship with Native people. There's no question about it, and with his white parishioners as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was his style?
Well, I wanted to tell you about the system that the Oblates used. He introduced it, I think, or perhaps it was introduced just after he left in the Okanagan. But it went by the name of the Shirus system, or later the Durio system. And basically, it was a system of village government. The Oblates could only be in one village for 3 or 4 days per year. And so consequently, that's a fairly light presence. And in order to
effect control,
or just convert these Native people, they had to have some system in place that would maintain the presence while they were not there. And so this system was a system of village councils that was set up. And there was a church-appointed chief and a hierarchy of village councilors. There was a captain who was chosen for his religious devotion. There were watchmen who were the eyes and ears of the priest when he was not there. Constables who were charged with enforcing the edicts of the village council. And this village council had not just religious power. It also had judicial power and social power. So that if gambling was not a civic crime, certainly, but it might have been a religious problem as far as the Oblates were concerned, the village council could impose penalties. The watchman would observe when gambling was done. There would be a public announcement about the transgressions that had occurred, and penalties would be imposed. Some of those penalties were fairly severe. For example, being whipped with a cat of 9 tails.
For gambling?
Well, for a variety of crimes, so-called crimes.
Who would be the administrator of this punishment? Would this be the chief, the designated chief?
Probably the constables that would be responsible for that.
Did this have a positive or a negative effect, in your opinion, this kind of...
Well, I'm not sure I'd put it in exactly those terms, but it certainly had an impact. There's no question about it. It had a huge impact on buttressing the power of the chief, and in fact, creating an authority in Indian villages where authority had not existed before.
an authority beyond the hereditary chief, beyond the normal.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And the oblate presence had a huge impact on such things as developing an agricultural lifestyle and even introducing industrial time. You think that the village clock, bell, was brought into Penticton in 1876, I think. And that bell rang to wake people up at 6 o'clock in the morning, to summon them to prayers before breakfast, to dismiss them for breakfast, to summon them to the fields. It rang again at noon, it rang again at 5 o'clock. It rang in the evening to summon them to evening prayers, and again at 10 o'clock for curfew.
The whole sound of this of society changed.
Oh my, this is industrial time brought into the interior by the church bell.
Isn't that interesting?
So the Oblates did have, I think, a fairly significant impact. Not just in a religious sense, but they were there as teachers. They practiced some medicine. They arranged for the village to fly a temperance flag to keep out the whiskey sellers.
They started the first residential school here, but it didn't last long.
They did. It only lasted for 3 years at the mission, from 1865 to 68. And it was never very attractive to the Okanogans. They imported some Shuswap students to come down, but the Oblates regarded the Okanagan people as too arrogant, not willing to send their children. But there were problems of disease and other things.
What happened to Pandosy? How did he die?
Pandosy's become a folk hero in the Okanagan. He opened the site up. He was here on 3 different other occasions in his career, and in fact, he was here in 1891 when he died on a trip to the Similkameen. On the way back, he died in Penticton, in fact, at the home of the church chief, Francois.
And was buried at the site. The grave just discovered in the 70s.
His body was brought to the back to the mission, and he was buried at the mission site in the cemetery there. And James Baker located that grave a few years ago now.
The story of Pandosy, I mean, thank you for fleshing it out, because he does take on folk hero status. He wasn't a folk hero in your opinion. He was a
constituency man. He was well loved by his parishioners, Indian and white. But his letters have a lot of his letters have to do with the jealousies and the backstabbing that went on within the order itself.
Would he have considered his life a success?
I think so, although he certainly did bridle under the jurisdiction that he found himself in.
Dwayne Thompson, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Mike.
The subject is Father Marie Charles Pandosy, who from 1859 to 1891 was a factor as far as the Oblates were concerned in our area of the world. We'll be back again next time with another story on Okanagan Pioneers and Places.